Welcome back to Handful. I'm here today with the lovely Nathan Blazer, and we are going to talk about one of the most influential series franchises of all time.
I like to think of it as a multimedia conglomerate empire that has effectively sought to rule our childhoods.
Absolutely. So we are here today, and we are going to talk about the best and the worst of Scooby-Doo. So you might think, when people think about the best and the worst, think the best, they usually are like, oh yeah, we got the original. And then you think about all the live-action movies that have come out. We've got, before the live-action movies, excuse me, there's the other Scooby-Doo series that have come out, like Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? And, you know, the adjacent ones. But then we have the live-action movies, which is usually where people jump to, like I just did. We have The Mystery Begins, as well as The Curse of the Lake Monster, and then Scooby-Doo, which was just titled Scooby-Doo, but that was the one where they went to Spooky Island. And we're not even going to get into that one today because we don't have enough time, frankly. And then lastly, Scooby-Doo 2, Monsters Unleashed. So we've got the live-action movies that people tend to think of. But really, what is the best of Scooby-Doo? I think we can all agree that
it's Mystery Incorporated.
It is Mystery Incorporated.
I will fight anyone that says otherwise. Of course, that is, we would be remiss to not mention things like, the 13 Ghosts, featuring such amazing, memorable characters as Flim Flam.
For sure. Flim Flam was the best.
But,
however,
to keep things focused.
Yes. As focused as we can here. But yeah, Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated was really, really where it's at. I mean, we had the whole, they really went into the lore of what makes a Scooby-Doo gang, where it's the four people and the one animal. As you can see, by the image, they really went into in this series, they went into who the previous Mystery Incorporated was before them. And there was lots and lots of other characters as well. Some of the more notable ones we put up here on the screen. We've got the Hex Girls, we've got the Sheriffs and the Mayors, and...
Is that a Vincent Van Gogh I spy?
That is a Vincent Van Gogh, and we must not forget George Avocados. George Avocados is my favorite Scooby-Doo character. Lots
of very classic characters. I think that the really broad picture that we have to appreciate about Scooby-Doo is that, something that we, especially as the younger generation, do not remember is that for a long time, Scooby-Doo was actually really blacklisted. Like, there was years where, like, Warner Brothers did nothing with Scooby-Doo, and it wasn't until, like, Monster Island, in fact, that they got first, like, started coming back.
Yeah.
And it was, like, just this direct to VHS thing that came out and was, like, a huge hit, and then they started making more. And that's what eventually got us this. But throughout all of the history of what happened, there was a lot of blunders, and that's why they eventually blacklisted it. And so they just, with this, they just pared everything back. They said, let's get the gang, let's do the thing, let's talk about what makes Scooby. And so, I'm sorry to cut you off.
Go for it.
They just said, you know what? Let's have the dog. Let's have the cast. Let's figure out the town. We're gonna get an ensemble cast, because everybody loves an ensemble cast these days, and then we're gonna serialize it. And then we're gonna make it so that the serialization is gonna go good, and then it's gonna go off the walls.
They went into it, they made it go off the walls, they made it go up the walls, they made it go down the walls, they put in the lore, they put thought into it, they had characters with backstories, and those characters had backstories, and their backstory had backstories that then you learned about 5 episodes later. It was truly a masterpiece.
You had wonderful writing in a way such that there were seeds dropped about the story from the first episode, and they just followed through.
The seeds planted, and they grew up into the beautiful tree that became the end.
Yeah.
I cried when I watched the last episode of this series.
I unfortunately have never reached the last episode.
That is probably a good thing, because it is a sad, sad day when you get to the end and you know there is no more. There's no more Mystery Incorporated for you to watch.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't get into it because they would never understand.
Mm-hmm. It's going to be a long time before we have a Scooby series like Mystery Incorporated that actually bothered to really, have writing.
Yeah, no, for sure. This series is good for so many reasons. The writing was fantastic. There was just so many different storylines and different character arcs and things, but like it wasn't confusing. It never occurred in a way where you were like, what is happening? They're just throwing random characters in here like a lot of the other Scooby-Doos have done. It was all very intentional, and you could tell that it was intentional, and it worked.
The ensemble cast had a very particular feel in that all of them were really useful, and all of them would have backstories that were fleshed out. And it would be very interesting to then eventually see one of like the ensemble cast become one of the monsters. It does raise interesting questions about what kind of budgets that people have in that town, as to like how literally everyone can just afford to be a realistic monster, but that's a different point.
That's neither here nor there. Yeah, right? Like one of the, it's a little bit of a spoiler, so if you are still pretty early in your Mystery Incorporated, maybe cover your ears for a bit. Don't turn the video off, just cover your ears. So, but we have the mayor pictured there, and he is assumed to be Fred's father. He's presented as Fred's father. And that's one of the really big character arcs, is that they find out that he's not, which I don't know why Fred didn't tell. Like, their hair colors are different. That's how this town works. Like, Velma's mom looks exactly like her.
I'd also like to point out there's no ascot.
There is no ascot, exactly. How would you know?
Yeah.
How would you know? There's no ascot.
We all know that we dress like our parents.
Absolutely.
There's no ascot.
There's no ascot. Like, what did he think was happening? But that's just one of the better character arcs, I think, or one of the best, I suppose, that was like really throughout, where it's just like, at first, he's just Fred's dad in the background, and he's like, hey Fred, you're back from building traps, that's cool, you're my son, I support you. And then you get halfway through, and he's the mayor, and he's one of the monsters, and he's not even Fred's dad. Like, nobody saw that coming. Nobody saw that coming.
I think also a really small detail that is like a nugget of just beauty is in the beginning their traps don't always work, and so I think that's like a really nice small detail type of thing where it shows like a development of their like skills and their abilities.
For sure. Yeah, it really does, where it's like, yeah, the traps don't always work, and a lot of the times I think the traps are a reflection of Fred. They're very much the like visible characterization of how he is doing inside, where there's a few romance arcs that can get a little bit dicey in terms of if they should be included or not, and it's very controversial. But there's definitely a lot of reflection of Fred in his traps, and I think all the characters have something like that.
Yeah, speaking of just like our main cast character development, going back to like our Scooby-Doo deep dive lore history, there was a long period of time where after the original series, they just kind of did random things like I was talking about before. One of the main characters that really actually only got to be recurring, though, was Daphne. Like, besides just your main Scooby gang, you would have like random people thrown in there. But Daphne was like a very common recurring character. And so Daphne is like one of the more, weirdly enough, like fleshed out characters. Velma, had like some different movies and stuff where like Velma would also get like fleshed out, but Fred was always just very much like, he's built like a refrigerator, he has an ascot, and it wasn't until this series that we got he's the guy that can really be anything that you need him to be for whatever given moment. Like, you can throw him into anything and he'll love it kind of guy. And like the niche love of traps and stuff, I think it was just wonderful and kooky, and it makes him seem less like a refrigerator.
Yeah, no, I think they did a great job developing Fred's character specifically in this series. But yeah, like all of them too, like you said, other ones just kind of had Daphne was the one that was really around along with Shaggy and Scooby. So having a little bit more characterization of both Velma and Fred was really, really, really a benefit of this series. But yeah, do you have anything else to add about this one, or do we want to maybe move into the worst of Scooby-Doo?
I'm so ready for
All
the
right,
worst.
so we're going to move into the worst, and I'm just going to let Nathan take it away.
All right, so we're talking about the, I believe it's the What's New Scooby-Doo era direct-to-DVD movies. So we're talking about Where's My Mummy? We're talking about Aloha Scooby-Doo. We're talking about the Mexico one. Not all of these were like bad, and some of them were like definitely formative for me growing up. There's like multiple different things that you can examine. One of them is the fact that this was like an era where Scooby-Doo as like a production team was first learning how to use CGI with animation, and so there's a lot of like really bad early 2000s animation that's just this peak creme de la creme.
It's really, yeah, it really just defines the era.
Yeah. And so it's for them that you can really see it there, but I'm not going to talk about that too much. I want to really examine, let's say, Where's My Mummy, Aloha Scooby-Doo, and The Monster of Mexico. Aloha Scooby-Doo is kind of interesting because with it being set in Hawaii, you really can't get around the natural tension that's there with like how Hawaii has always, as we've known it in modern history, existed in a colonial state. And they explore and touch on that a little bit through there, but the ending, it leaves you kind of feeling a little gross these days, not to mention just like the setting and the fact that they're always just drinking from like coconuts very casually and even like breaking them on their heads. It's very, it rubs me the wrong way as maybe like a little bit cultural appropriation.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think it's very important to recognize the the cultural insensitivity that a lot of these movies have. So like you said, looking at the Aloha Scooby-Doo one, but also the Monsters in Mexico, where it was a lot of very, very similar things, where they were like having the sombreros thrown around and kind of like the mariachi style instruments, where it's again, pretty much cultural appropriation.
The most egregious of which is actually in your backgrounds, actually. Because a lot of the times they'll just be random taco joints with such fabulous names as Los Tacos. That is a legit name that they drop not once, but multiple times for background settings.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's really all I need to say there for that, really.
There's not,
and like the Where's My Mummy thing just is more my own grievance with just like the fact that we always just still equate Egypt with like ancient Egypt. I feel like we can like get a little bit beyond that. That's a small gripe there. And also it's just weird because, spoilers, Velma's the villain.
Yeah, that's another reason that these are the worst, is because you can't do that. Like, you can't just, that's not how it works. That's not how Scooby-Doo works. You can't just take Velma and be like, actually, well, okay, so there's one where she like tries to kill everybody on accident, and then there's this one where she tries to kill everybody on purpose. And it's like, you can't just do that. Velma's whole character is that she's the smart one. That's kind of her thing. Like, first of all, she's not gonna kill people on accident. And then she's not, like, why, it just doesn't make any sense.
It's just really weird, like, in character, like, in world-wise, it's like there's a roundabout explanation for it, but it still is just kind of weird, and also that movie just goes off the rail. There's, like, a secret cult, and the cult gets in a war with, like, archaeologists. It's a whole thing.
Yeah, there's a lot of things wrong with this, which is why we have it labeled as the worst of Scooby-Doo. I think there's a lot more we could say, but I think we've kind of hit all the main points here. I do want to take one moment to just go back and bask in the gloriousness that is Mystery Incorporated one more time, because it's so amazing. Like, look at all those characters.
It's beautiful.
They're also wonderfully fleshed out, and their own individual character with their own motivations and their own story arc and their own time and place, and they're not pushed into places they're not supposed to be, and they're not overused or overdone or like, just made to exist to fill a plot. They all have their own thing, and they do it good.
I think that's really all we need to say about Scooby-Doo for now.
I think I agree as well. I think we've said all the important things. There's really not much else to say. So, thank you very much for watching this segment and episode of Handful, and we will see you back here next week.